Yes, a tree. I think a tree looks something like this, right? No, we're not going to do this tree. No. No tree today. We're going to draw a legit tree today. Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Nuri here. For those of you who don't know me, I am HCA's art director and program instructor in the Antelope Valley. I teach a number of different art classes, including drawing, painting, screen printing, ceramics, to name a few, as well as being the designer for a lot of HCA's in-house collateral, posters, flyers, logo design, you name it, I've probably designed it. Today, in celebration of Earth Day, that's right, Earth Day 2020 is today, we are going to be doing a fun little illustration of an oak tree. Oak tree, for me at least, is a symbol of resilience and fortitude, and they just look beautiful. So we're going to be drawing one of those today, and hopefully building up some of the skills that we've covered in our last videos. Like many of the previous tutorials that we've done, we are going to be doing this just with basic stuff you hopefully can find around your house. For today's tutorial, we're going to need a basic number 2 pencil, or any pencil that you have lying around, a sheet of paper, once again, any type of paper will do. I'm going to be using just 8.5 by 11 computer paper, and an eraser would be handy as well. With that, let's go ahead and get started. All right. So to get started with drawing our trusty old oak tree, what we're going to do is create a general shape or outline of our tree. Now, this will help us work from a broader perspective and then hone in on the details. No doubt, when you think of a tree or drawing a tree, maybe we do something like this, you know, kind of like a cloud that's stuck on a pole. Maybe you'll give it some grass. If it's a lucky tree, it might get some ground. But pretty simple. And for all intents and purposes, sure, that's an okay tree. But we're going to take it a step further. Now, this is actually not a bad way to start. This is a general shape of a tree, but I'm just going to flip my paper over here. And we're actually going to start by getting our ground and then starting with a very, very light and rough shape of what we want our tree to look like. Any oak trees I know, the branches kind of hang low, so I'm going to bring this down. I don't want the leaves too high up on here. I hope that you can see this. Once again, it will get darker as we continue, but I'm just creating an overall general shape for what I want this tree to look like. This is going to serve as our blueprint as we move along in the sketch. Things might change, so once again, you don't want to start with details or adding in any bark or leaves, or you definitely don't want to draw each individual leaf, because A, that will take forever, and B, in case things change, we want to be able to change them, which is why we work from a broader sketch and hone in on the details. Okay, so now what we're going to do, now that we have a general shape and outline of our tree, we are going to start by drawing the trunk. So I'm going to commit to a little bit of a darker line on this side. I like the way this trunk is looking, and then we are going to just kind of create one line going this way, and as the branches actually we get further in the branches, they're going to come down a little bit. So it kind of looks like a really, really crooked half moon crescent shape maybe. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Draw the other side of the trunk, and then we are going to bring the branch down like so. Perfect. Okay, these lines definitely don't need to be perfect. In fact, it kind of helps their cause a little bit if you make them less than perfect. This is an organic shape, being a tree, and any little notches or curves or imperfections you have in your line, we could use those. So don't feel like this needs to be perfect. All right, so far so good. We're off to a good start. Next up, this kind of faint line I had going up right from the middle, I'm going to kind of continue that a little bit. That is going to transform itself into another branch. A lot of the times with those really cartoony trees that we drew in the beginning, the cloud sticking on the popsicle sticks, excuse me, You just have literally that. But a great way to make a tree look more realistic is to show some of the branches within the tree. So for this branch, I'm going to have it just kind of curve up a little bit. I don't want to darken it all the way down because we wouldn't see that branch going through the trunk. So we're just going to go ahead and make that line like that. I will clean up right here, erase that line. Cool. All right, we're moving along here. Now here comes a little bit more of the fun part. I'm going to make some more branches coming off of this guy. This is completely at your discretion. We don't want to overpopulate with branches, but we do want to get a good amount in there. Oaks have a lot of gnarled, kind of twisted limbs, and we kind of want that to show through. So what I'm doing is similar to when we started off with our base down here. I'm going to have each branch kind of curl down just a little bit. Now, each of these branches can have a little line coming off. And once again, I'm just doing simple little lines here. None of these, I'm not fleshing them out. They're not 3D looking. This is almost like the equivalent of a stick figure tree. We are just drawing the branches. We're trying to see where we want these things to go. You can have them come off in other ways. I would have your branches have other branches branching off. That's why they're called branches. And this is eventually going to develop our entire tree branch system, which I'm hoping will look very cool in the end. Fantastic. All right, got some trees. You know what? I'm going to add another one down here. Once again, we don't want to fill up the whole thing. There's going to be a lot of leaves or foliage covering a lot of these. So we don't want to get too many branches in there and have it too busy. Sometimes what we call negative space says a lot more than just filling something up. Where the absence of line is, it could speak a lot as well. So I did want to fill in this space right here. I'm going to adjust this branch, move it a little way so we have more space there. Et voila! We have our branch system in place just by drawing some little lines. Also, lastly, I might do another one coming off right there. Great. Okay, next up, we're going to kind of define the overall outline or silhouette of the tree itself. So right now I have this kind of squiggly, wavy ghost line in place. I'm going to develop that a little bit more and create some outline. This line that I'm making is just kind of, I want to say it's a little bit curvy, a little bit jagged. It's almost like a little mountain range or some wavy lines. What I'm doing though is I don't want this to look like just a round puffy shape like a cloud. I want to cut in some areas, kind of like a little inlet. Imagine like you're drawing a coastline on a map. You want little coves and nooks and crannies, just like an English muffin. And this is going to make the tree, once again, look more organic. If we just had an oval, that would look pretty simple. And doing something like this, where you add a little bit more detail, really kind of pushes home the idea that this is a shape that occurs naturally, and that isn't something that's man-made. So far so good. We got a shape in there that looks a little bit more tree-like. This looks a little blockish in this corner, so what I'm going to do, erase some lines to clean it up. Once again, the virtue of pressing lightly means we can erase very cleanly. I'm actually going to have this cut in a little bit. If it's easier for you, a lot of the time, these branches, or I'm sorry, the leaf outline that we're currently drawing can follow the branches. So for example, at the end of any of these little forks or branched areas, ideally you'd have some leaves coming off the side there. And that can actually be a good reference to inform where your outline for the leaves actually is going to go. So to clean this up a little bit and make it a bit more legible for you to see, there we go. There we go. Right here, I'm going to cut in a little bit more, make it a little bit more organic. Kind of looking like a oversimplified maple leaf at the moment. Okay, looking pretty good. As you can see, a lot of these branches end up in a leafy like shape. So far, this tree makes sense. About as much sense as most trees make. Okay. Now, what we did for the outline of our tree, we're going to do inside the tree. This, I've been throwing around the word cloud a lot, so I just want you to draw little clouds inside of your tree shape. These can take on a shape, any shape, but really you want to go something, if you really want to get simple with it, something that generally looks like a cloud. I'm going to erase that later, but right now I want to keep on adding some of these cloud-like shapes. And what these are doing is just going to give us a little bit of differentiation in the shape of our tree. These are going to be areas where the leaves are going to be in front. Therefore, we're not going to see the entire workings of the tree. If we were to, let's say, cut this entire tree in half, then sure, maybe you'd see the entire branch structure. But since we want this to look a little bit more realistic, as if we are viewing this tree on a grassy knoll, then we're going to see leaves interrupting a lot of these branch systems. And once again, always pressing lightly so that you can erase if you need to. Okay, got a lot going on. Got some tree lines, we got some cloud shapes. What we want to do now is start adding a little bit of a texture for the trees. But before that, we're going to define these branches a bit more. So the little tree stick figure isn't going to cut it in the end. So what we're going to do is on either side of each of the branches that you've defined, we're going to continue and actually turn it into a shape. We turn into a shape by drawing a line that is parallel to the line you made before. And we can connect them like so. So once again, you see you have kind of a fork shape right here. I'm going to draw a line on the underside here, connect it, connect this, and then we have something that's a little bit more fleshed out. Another branch right here. Just going to connect these guys. And I'm going to do that for all of the branches. A general rule of thumb, all these branches, especially as you get towards the extremities of the tree, should be a little bit thinner. I'm making them wider than I probably normally would, just so it's easier to see, but you can make these as skinny as you want. This is also a great opportunity to add in some more branches, branching off from your existing branches that you drew, in case you want those to, in case you want a little bit more detail. Okay. The other part of this, in addition to adding some volume and shape to your branches, is our goal is to kind of connect everything. So we have a better idea of where these cloudy leaf partitions we drew earlier are going to go and where our branches actually live. So once again, we're just going through, we're connecting all of these pieces, giving them a little bit of shape, a little bit more volume. This one right here, we are gonna, you saw what I did there. I basically drew the line underneath to make it almost parallel, make it a little bit wider. None of these should kind of come crooked like that in the end. I mean, maybe, I guess, if you want it to look that way. I just find that it looks a bit more organic if you round off a lot of those shapes. And so this one is thicker towards the base as it meets the trunk, and then we're just gonna go ahead and thin it out as we get to the bottom there. Fantastic. Now, I could go in and I could erase a lot of the extraneous lines that I have here to make it a little bit neater. However, what we're doing next is going to be adding some texture and some value to our tree. So a lot of these lines might come in handy. Now, we also have to keep in mind that we're going to be adding a little bit more texture on our leaves. So we want to make sure that what we add on our actual trunk and our branches, A, resembles a bark-like texture, and B, is different from what our leaves actually end up looking like. So in order to do that, we are going to use a simple hatching method. And it's okay, on this part, you can go a little bit darker. I'm just gonna start on one side and kind of make short little lines. Oh, another thing before we get started on this, we haven't discussed too much about lighting. That is an integral part of drawing, and to establish a light source is what really gives your drawing a lot of depth in the end. In our case, basically, we're going to establish a lighting source coming from the left-hand side. If the light is coming from this side, that means the right-hand side of our tree is going to be darker. So it's a good rule of thumb to remember your basic, I guess, idea of where your lighting source is coming from. It's a good way to build up the volume and the depth of your piece. And it doesn't need to be anything spectacular. This is a simple tree. We're going to be adding some detail in here. So you can just make up where the lighting source comes from. If you would prefer it coming from the right, then all your shadows would fall on this side. But whenever I'm approaching a simple lighting situation like this, I like to imagine that if the sun or lighting source is coming from whatever angle I determine it, that the undersides are going to be the darker part. So I'm going to press a little bit darker here. I would say that you should probably press however comfortable you are. This is something I've done a few times, so I know what my mark is going to look like. I kind of know what I want it to express, and I'm just going to add in a few areas where I can tell, or I know, such as the bottom of the branches, that this is going to be a bit darker under here. Okay. Just continuing, filling in all of these areas that are a little bit darker. The other nice part about this is that with this texture we're adding, we are making a nice distinction between our leaves and the branches of our tree. So by making it a little bit darker with these hash marks, we're delineating what is part of the tree system, which will make it easier. Oh, I forgot to make these guys a little bit thicker. We're going to make it easier to determine where our leaves and such are going to go. Now, this is the darker side. This is where our shadow is falling, as I mentioned. Tree bark kind of has a lot of lines, a lot of little notches and little areas in it. So although this side is going to be lighter, which I can show by doing lighter marks, I still do want to add some texture in there. It would look kind of off if I just had one side completely filled with marks and a bit darker and then the other side wasn't. Now, another way to approach this is we can also imagine that each of these little hatches is working its way up or down the trunk. And so you can kind of make little guidelines, if this is easier for you, that sort of follow the branch structure, and then you can choose to make those darker or lighter if you want. I'm going to go ahead and make it a good concentration of lines, a lot of density at the bottom, so it kind of gets darker there. That's a nice little trick you can use to kind of lift the viewer's eyes up towards the rest of your piece. Once again, I want to fill in most areas with these hash marks, but being cognizant of what areas I want to be darker and more concentrated and what areas I want to be lighter. Okay, great. Most of this seems to be defined. So now that I have most of my texture in on my tree, we are going to clean up where a lot of the branches go into the cloud shapes we did before. Once again, pressing lightly makes erasing much, much easier. And once this is done, meaning erasing these sections, I got a better idea of what my leaves are going to look like. So now this is a great opportunity to kind of cut off any more branches that you may not want to be fully exposed. So here I feel like I don't want to see those branches up top. So I'm going to get rid of those, and I'll have it connect here. Anywhere where we don't have one of these cloud shapes or a tree branch, we're going to take that to be kind of see-through, where there's going to be nothing. So you can kind of organize your tree however you'd like. And at this point, it's just a matter of connecting a lot of these different spaces and objects to create a tree shape and consistency that you're happy with. Happy little trees. Fantastic. Okay. We have our tree mostly fleshed out here. Now it's time that we add a little bit more texture to our leaves. So the way we're gonna do this is kind of pressing, I wouldn't say super light, but definitely not dark. I just kind of want to throw in some curls. These curls are almost like little crescent shapes, and what I'm doing with them is I'll choose to do a section all going the same direction, kind of in a row, and then I might switch it up a little bit. And I want to do this on all of these cloud shapes to fill up all of these leafy sections and give our leaves some texture. This is a nice curl shape to use because it's different from the hatches that we did before. So you're going to have a nice variation in line quality between your hashes and your leaves. Okay, we've got a lot of little curlicues going in our tree. We might just go ahead and add a little bit more. This is also a great opportunity to add in any areas to clean up any branch areas in case you decide that you want a branch to exist or not exist in an area. You can erase or cover it up as you see fit. Okay, just as we did with our tree trunk by kind of shading in this part to make it a bit darker, we're going to do the same with our leafy sections. And to do that, we're going to remember that our lighting source is coming from the top left, and so a lot of the leaves that are on the opposite corner of that, meaning your bottom right of a lot of these sections, you can go ahead and continue doing a lot of these curl marks, but just add in more line density. You can do curlicues, you can do short curved hatches, really anything you like that kind of looks like a leaf. Maybe it won't look like a leaf itself, the mark, but in conjunction with the other lines that you're doing and the line density, by adding in more areas of kind of light and dark, it's gonna serve to make this look a little bit more realistic. So this is starting to develop pretty nicely. This is also a great way to practice your line making and to fill in a lot of different areas You can, if you're responding to a certain type of line more so than another, go ahead and go with that. You know, if you want to do something that's a little bit more curly, that's more rounded, feel free to go with it. If the short little bursts and the hatch marks, if you can get into a rhythm doing it, go for that too. Once again, you just kind of want to make sure that's a little bit differentiated between your tree trunk and your leaves itself. This is looking like a pretty good tree sketch at the moment. If you want to take in your eraser and kind of lighten up some areas along the way, that kind of smudged it more, so I'm going to use this eraser to lighten up some areas, or to add in or remove areas of line density that you don't want to show. Feel free to do so. Also, with a drawing like this, I think a lot of folks use their finger to actually blend or smudge a little bit. If not your finger, you can have these little blenders. That's a great technique. This drawing is a little small for that, and also if you have a drawing that is predominantly based in line making or marks, then smudging is gonna blend a lot of that together, and is gonna kind of muddy things up a little bit. So if you want to try it out, I say go for it, because this is in the end all about experimentation and seeing what works for you. But in my case, I opted not to do that. At the moment now, I'm just kind of filling in some areas that I want to be a little bit darker. Just kind of like short little bursts. Show us some shadows underneath these leaves here. And you could really go on for a little bit of time doing this. I mean, this is a pretty quick sketch, but I would recommend or hope that you spend some time falling in love with the tree that you ended up drawing and filling it up to your content. I don't think there's any real wrong way to add leaves or bark texture. There's definitely things that are more successful than others, but that will, I think, depend on where you want your sketch to go and ultimately what your goal for it is. We're just having fun, so I don't see any harm in just diving in and playing around with a bunch of different marks. Hopefully this serves as a pretty good primer for mark making and using line to establish texture and value. Okay, looks pretty good. It's a happy little tree. Happy big tree on Earth Day. There you go. So I think this tree is pretty much grown. So I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial and hope that you make many, many trees and draw your own little forest. In the meantime, if you have not already, feel free to like and subscribe HCA Programs channel. You can check out a lot more HCA live videos, and stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time, folks.